Hello YouTube, it is Leon from the Mighty Die YouTube channel. It is time for another battle report. It has been a while since we put up some videos, so after yesterday's game I figured it would be fun to give you guys some more content. It is just going to be me today because we did not have time after the game to record this. So it'll just be me giving my thoughts about the game, and hopefully I can still recall some of Steve's thought about the game and his play as well. So without further ado, let's check out the armies. Over on my side of the table, I am playing Harkevich, so that's definitely a very familiar caster on this channel. I've been playing him pretty exclusively in MK3. This time though, I changed up his list a little bit. Actually, I've had this list in War Room for a while, but because I like to play painted or as much as possible, I wasn't very keen on fielding this list generally because it does include a couple of jacks that I haven't painted yet, nor am I really keen on on painting. But now with the Manowar CID in week one, there's a chance that some of these jacks might change in value, and this list will probably not really exist in this form pretty soon. So I was keen to still try this out before that change became official. So, like I said, main caster Harkevich. In his battle group this time I have 6 jacks. Just like the other list, it is 3 Kodiaks, and instead of 3 Juggernauts, I'm running 3 Marauders. So that's I guess the main change, and also one of the main changes maybe with the upcoming CID. And I haven't really played with Marauders until now, so I'm keen to see what this has been all about in the larger meta. Then also a bigger change, while I still have 2 Fort Seers in this list, I am not marshalling a behemoth this time, but instead bringing 1 destroyer per Fort Seer, so they're both marshalling 1, which brings up my total jack number to 8 versus the other list running 8 jacks. Which is quite nice. I think I felt in the past that if I'm being alpha'd and I lose 2 or 3 jacks, and being down to 4 or 5 jacks, at that point the critical mass is gone. I didn't really feel I had enough options either for scenario or for doing damage after having taken that alpha in. And I think the 8 number might actually be a slightly more comfortable number to lose a bunch of jacks and still feel I can do enough in that kind of turn 3 or 4, and not just be on the back foot the whole time. So I'm keen to see how that 8 number works for me. And then as support, I'm bringing 1 unit of eliminators, and I still have my Widowmaker marksman as well. On Cygnar's side, I see a Stryker 2. Steve has been very much looking forward to fielding Stryker 2. He's been making a bunch of lists, and he's very excited about what he brings to the table in, I guess, today's meta. He was very excited to give this list a try. Let me see if I can remember what he brought and what the models are. There's a Lancer there. Lancer is quite good. He's an arc node and also has a very nasty arc node removing shield. He's also bringing a Firefly, as well as Stryker 2's biggest friend, Rowdy, I believe. I think it's called Rowdy. Quite a couple of nice benefits with Stryker 2. Then he's bringing 2 maximum units of Storm Lances and a unit of Storm Blades with UA. And he also has a number of solos, Piper, Strange Ways, and the Junior that gives out Arcane Shield. We are playing the mission The Pit 2, and rolled off to see who gets a decision to go first or choose table sides. I rolled higher, which is actually very nice because I typically roll lower, I think, on average, and especially this list really benefits from going first and getting those jacks up the field quite far. On the table, there's quite a few terrain features. I didn't really look at these things all that much because I knew I wanted to go first. So I that was my choice, and then Steve chose the site that had a water feature, some difficult terrain, as well as a hill. And I'm kind of stuck with a forest and a hill, and there's also a line of sight blocking house in the middle and a trench on my side. His list has ways to give Pathfinder, so he's not too bothered by some of those terrain features on his side of the table, and there's also plenty of room to squeeze through. On my side, I'm quite happy with the hill and the forest. It gives me some initial cover, maybe a spot to stick Harkevich behind, and the house is of course also a nice way to offer some protection against the crazy threat range on Stryker 2 when he wants to do his assassination run. We will be playing on Deathclock. For me, it has been a while that I played in general, as well as on Deathclock, so that might be something I have to take into consideration a little bit. Um, so on the deployment for me, and also for Steve, I guess we had a bit of a talk before the game. What would be good play, bad deployment, and our initial thoughts on this. And we decided that because he has such a fast list and he wants to ideally avoid not seeing my whole army because of my clouds, it is wise for him to kind of spread out and force me to spread out over those multiple zones. And if he then kind of flanks me, he can avoid some of those line of sight blocking clouds and get the alpha on me with Striker 2's feet. And knowing that he has a number of attack boosting spells, um, and of course the storm lenses hit quite hard on the charge, that alpha might really hurt me. So that's something I want to try and avoid. He uses a similar tactic if he plays his Nemo 3 list, where he puts both Storm Striders on the front, so I can never really quite protect all my jacks behind those three cloud walls. As a mitigating tactic on my side, I thought it was a good idea to play a scoot game where I focus mostly on one zone where my jacks can score. That means that I have a couple of models in the center that can still contest the infantry zone, so to speak, and then I have to feed some kind of model or models in the right zone in this case to prevent him from scoring in case he puts a light warjack or a rowdy in that other warjack zone. So that's what I do. I skew more towards the left, and I dedicate my Kiazi assassins, or Kiazi eliminators, the marksman, and sort of my right flank to contest that right zone. But most of my jacks are definitely more skewed towards the left zone, where I want to make sure that I can take out his objective and score my points there. I cannot really say too much about Steve's deployment thoughts. As you can see, he's also screwed over a little bit towards that side, or my side, the left side. But he has unit of storm lenses on the right side who can easily take out the objective, so that give him an easy 1 point lead if he manages to do this. Also, Rowdy is a little bit more on that side, so he can both protect Striker 2 in that center zone, close to the house, as well as if needed, maybe score a point in that right zone. And then he has most of his hitting power between the storm blades and the storm lances, facing off against the majority of my army. So he's probably hoping for a nice strong alpha on that side of the table. In my first turn, I activate Harkevich first. I cast mobility and he walks up 7 inches. And after that, I start with my Kodiaks. They all run forward as far as they can go. They run 14 inches because of mobility, as well as their heavy boiler, which is awesome. First turn. This doesn't allow them to use their vent steam rule, but Cygnar doesn't have that many long range shooting, and despite having very far threat ranges, especially with Striker 2's feet, if he really wants to use that feat first turn to take out one Kodiak, that's fine. So you already see one Kodiak actually towing the zone, and I held back the rest a little bit further, because not everything has to be like max range in a zone I can't even score points in. Plenty of time to move those jacks forward. Then the Marauders are a little bit slower, so they are further back a bit, also protecting the jacks in front of them for counter charges and stuff, or actually having them available to counter charge in my turn later. And also you see the destroyers moving forward after having received some focus from those fort seers. I was dumb enough to actually not move one of the fort seers before allocating focus and starting the destroyer's activation, so he's lagging behind just a little bit. Lesson learned. And on the right flank, the eliminators start their approach towards the zone, so I can contest those in later turns. And the marksman takes up a defensive position behind the house in the center. On Cygnar's turn 1, he has a bunch of stuff moving up, running up. Main thing to notice here is that for all of his units, he's trying to stay outside of my threat range. So on the left, you see his Stormblades after having had their advanced move. That they stay outside of the 10 or so inches of threat range from the Kodiaks. You see this sort of like big group of models between the light warjacks and the storm lances there in the center, hoping to charge into my lines on his next turn, ideally with his feet, I would assume. You also see that he positions his lancer behind the house. So if I move up further with my Kodiaks there, I have that issue of having that lancer and also Stryker's character jack in my flank. So that's probably something I should try to deal with. Then over on the right side, his storm lenses stay outside of threat ranges of the charges, and also staying back on that hill, ideally protecting those storm lances from the destroyer that's coming up, or a marksman taking a shot at them in my next turn. On my second turn, I start to think what ideally I should do. I think Harkevich's second turn is always quite interesting because I'm always choosing or doubting, better said, between moving up again and just doing the cloud wall trick, or doing that plus feeding in case I want to be extra cautious, or running up, so run to engage, and pop feed so that I jam my jacks into his lines and preventing him from getting charge bonuses. I generally prefer to do the first, so basically taking another turn of doing the smoke shuffle, which prevents him from really charging in, because it would block line of sight to most of my jacks, which would give him some headaches, because it's like, do I walk and engage and do less damage, or do I stay back for another turn, which might cost him some more board positioning. So after some consideration, that's also what I decided to do. Steve was under the impression that I should have done this in combination with my feet, just to be extra careful, because this is an important turn. But I always kind of feel it's such a waste to pop feet, even though I already know that I'm blocking line of sight to a number of his most impactful units, and I really want to keep that feat for turn 3. So I don't really move all that much in this case because the lines are really closing at this point. So I'm not casting mobility, and you see that my Kodiaks just move forward a little bit, typically between 4 and 6 inches. I think one trampled, and put some smoke clouds in the way of his units. So over on the right side, the cloud wall is blocking line of sight from the storm lances on the hill to that sort of like right flank of my main battle line. Then over on the left side, there's a couple of Stormblades that can still see my jacks, but the majority of the Stormblades don't have any line of sight to my Kodiaks and Marauders, and also the Storm Lances there that were waiting for that charge are not able to draw line of sight to my main battle line. Of course, there's still some stuff that's maybe within walking range. That Lancer over there is pretty close to my jacks. But I'm not as afraid of his coming turn and those charges and maybe even the feet on top of that. And I think in general I shouldn't expect to lose any jacks from his guy just walking up and taking swings at armor 20 warjacks. On the right side, the destroyer did try to take out a Stormlance, which actually I managed to do between boosting to hit as well as using the Fort Shear's Jack Marshall ability True Strike or Strike True. So I had a bunch of attack roll bonuses to make that happen, and I managed to take off a couple of boxes of that Stormlance with that, and then also the Marksman with his auto 3 points of damage contributed and took out one Stormlance. On Steve's turn 2, he indeed decides to walk his models in and try to cause as much damage as possible. The other option would have been for him to stay back, wait out this turn, and then maybe go for that nastier alpha in combination with charges on a later turn. But as you can see over on the left side, he walks as many Stormblades into my Kodiak as possible. I think there were one or two models that did make it to a charge and cause some minor damage. I believe he took out a arm on that Kodiak. Then in the center, he moves his Lancer in and starts bashing my Kodiak with his shield. So with the three focus that he got allocated, he actually managed to take out all Cortex boxes on that Kodiak. And there's also a little Stormblade standing there, kind of blocking the path of the Marauder. So the lines there are engaged. Damage has been fairly minimal to my jacks, which is what I was hoping for. So far, so good. Then over on the right side, he walked his Stormlances from the hill into my Kodiak as well, causing some minor damage there. I'm not sure if he took out any systems, but the Kodiak is still quite operational. Then also on that right side with the Stormlance, he's trying to cause some initial damage to the objective. I think he did about 3 damage to the objective. Turn 3, Khador side. This is definitely my feet turn. I'm fairly happy with how last turn went. It went as I predicted. However, I do have to say that Steve forgot to feed. He did want to basically engage, do that initial damage, feed, and have another round of doing damage with all of these models. He did forget this, so that's yeah, quite a big shift in his plan. I don't know how much damage it would have done. I'm not too familiar with sort of the damage output of that list in combination with that feat. But as it stands, and again, unfortunately, he did forget this. It's looking pretty good for me. At least I feel that now that the lines are engaged and I don't have to fear that hard alpha strike, I can really kind of start grinding down his army, and I still have my feet. So like I said, I start the turn by feeding, so all my warjacks are sitting on armor 23, except for the destroyers that are marshaled by the Fort Sears, but there's plenty of armor to go around. So on the left side, my Fort Sear destroyer package move forward, and the destroyer takes out a single Stormblade. That's a bit sad, but I couldn't get more into melee. Over on the center, the fact that I don't have any Cortexes left on my Kodiak really reduces his ability to do damage to that Lancer, even though it's just a light warjack. Unfortunately, I don't manage to hit with both initials, so I can't knock him down or throw him against the Stormlances behind it. So he's kind of standing there trying to do the best he can. Then also on that side, there's an empty base that represents a Kodiak, and the Kodiak was actually quite good at getting rid of some Stormblades between his team as well as his initials. So that's going quite nicely. And I also move in, actually charged in a Marauder into his Lancer. The feed is up, so I'm charging for free, causing some damage, but I wasn't able to actually take out the Lancer. So I do expect that he will have some fun next turn, bashing out his core deck boxes as well. Then sort of in the back lines or on the side of Harkevich, I still have two Marauders in reserve. It gets a bit cramped there, so I can't really utilize all of my jacks there. I do move one Marauder back to Harkevich, keeping him in base to base. Because I don't really need him in the front lines right now, and having that Iron Sentinel bonus is always nice. You never know if you're overseeing an assassination angle, and that little bonus might just help him survive. On the right side, the Kodiak took out two Stormlances. The other Stormlance was too far away from him for him to hit, so that's quite nice. Unfortunately, I did forget here that of course Harkevich has Field Marshal reposition, so I should have really moved that Kodiak back and keep him out of charge range of Old Rowdy. But hey, yeah, forgot. Over on the right side, I decided to run and engage the Stormlands with my Eliminator, just to keep him occupied and unable to contribute to the fight in the center, which later proved out to be a mistake because defense 17 does not always protect you if there's electro leaps. And the other eliminator is towing the zone far away from the action, because I do really want to keep them for late game, to be annoying and prevent Steve from scoring some points. In Cygnar's previous turn, he also ran up Lattimore between my Destroyer and Kodiak, so on my side of the board. I would assume he did this to prevent the Destroyer from moving up the board, or maybe putting some additional pressure in my backfield going towards Harkevich. I'm not entirely sure. So that meant that I could actually try and take her out with my Destroyer there. And between the additional focus he gets from the forts here and the attack bonuses from Strike True, I was able to hit her, and with some big damage, I thought kill her, but I always make this mistake. You don't kill her outright. She is just dismounted. So that's always very unfortunate if you're just running out of focus to take care of the whole model. Steve was then also smart enough to put her on the far end of the base, which put her out of line of sight of my Eliminator, who could have finished her off. So I wasn't very keen on having her dance and run around behind my lines. So my marksman takes aim, needing a 7 to hit, which is 50-50, but luckily I make it. And then instead of doing 3 auto points of damage, which still wouldn't have killed her, I roll for damage and roll high enough, which is actually an okay roll to make, to take care of Lattimore. So that's quite a nice piece removed from the table. It takes away some of those bonuses on those models, and again, I don't have that threat of her running behind my lines. Going to Cygnar's turn 3, you see the Stormlances on the left side coming forward. On the left side, two Stormlances charge my Destroyer, doing some damage, but because I have armor, actually did not have armor 23, but he actually didn't roll all that well on the Destroyer, so he's doing some damage, but no systems are disabled. On the center, you really do notice that he's having a hard time cracking that armor. Of course, he does bash my Marauder 3 times and takes out his Cortex, so that's great fun. And the two Stormlances and the remaining Stormblades start doing some damage to the Kodiak, but nothing too significant. Over on the right side, Old Rowdy indeed charges the Kodiak, which I could have prevented if I had remembered reposition, and takes out a fair bit of boxes. I think his movement system is disabled at this point, as well as one of his arms, but the cortex is still there, so that's definitely nice for me. And then the Stormlance he still had standing there is moving around my Kodiak, moving closer to Harkevich. And he's actually now, as you can see, also in front of my destroyer. Old Rowdy decided to use his knockdown tech that he has on his hammer to knock down the Kodiak. And when this was done, he realized that this might actually also affect his Stormlance. So in this case, that Stormlance in front of the destroyer is actually also knocked down, which is nice because you never know if you reliably hit defense 13. And then over on the right side, as I said before, I was planning on holding up that Stormlance with my defense 17 Eliminator, but Steve rightfully and smartly he just hit the objective, and then the Electro Leaps killed her. So that was a nice way to avoid the high defense on that model. Overall, definitely chipping away on some boxes, but the armor 23 is really protecting me from the worst of his attacks. With about 15 minutes left on my clock, I start my turn 4. Steve, on the other hand, is down to 13 minutes. Neither of us have scored any points, and there's still plenty of models in both zones to prevent scoring. So I think we realized that both of us have been playing a bit on the slow side. Maybe me especially, considering I have definitely fewer models than Steve. But hey, so it's the turn after my feet turn. Everything is engaged. I didn't lose any of my jacks at this point, I believe. So it's time to just do the Khador thing and grind along, hopefully clearing that left zone so I can score a point next turn. So over on the left side, the destroyer actually manages to almost kill 2 Stormlances because one of them toughed. It's a spell effect from one of his solos. So tough can either be amazing or not at all in some games, and in this case, on Stormlands, it becomes quite powerful if your opponent rolls well. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to clear 2 Stormlances on that left flank. It would have been amazing, but it was not to be. Then my Marauder charged into the zone as well, to sort of the middle piece of that zone to clear it of a number of infantry models, and is also very close to the objective now to potentially remove it in later turns. Somehow I was very focused on just getting rid of a couple of infantry models where maybe the better play would have been anyway to just take away that objective, because of course the clock is running quite low, so maybe that makes a difference a little later. The empty base Kodiak, so to speak, is still battling it out with that big clump of models there. Actually, between his initials and buying some attacks, he managed to kill both of the Stormlances there, but both of them toughed, which is very unfortunate. Again, I'm trying to clear the zone. And again, when tough works, it's amazing. So that was a little bit annoying considering I'm really trying to remove some models here, and also the Marauder and Kodiak that are facing off against the Lancer just don't manage to do any meaningful damage between not having Cortexes anymore and the Lancer having Arcane Shield on him. This time I did manage to headbutt him successfully after the smash and grab from the Kodiak, but of course him being a base to base with me, that doesn't really mean much if he can just forfeit movement. On the right side then, the Kodiak goes into Old Rowdy, does a decent amount of damage, but I'm also already fairly damaged. I think half of my boxes are away at this point, so I don't really expect that the Kodiak can come out of on top, facing off against Old Rowdy. So as a precaution, I move Harkevich further away from Old Rowdy, moving it towards the hill, and keeping that Marauder close by for Iron Sentinel, and kind of blocking off that lane from that side. The Destroyer does a good job of killing the knockdown Stormlands. So thanks, Rowdy, for using your special attack and knocking them down. Not having to hit defense 13 is always nice. So that's another Stormlands gone. And then over on the right side, I'm not making the same mistake again by engaging that Stormlands and being electrolab to death. So I actually move to the far end of the zone and just kind of toe in, trying to be a problem with that defense 17. Important to note at this point, when I conclude my turn, I actually only have about 2 minutes and a couple seconds left on my clock, which is not a whole lot considering it's only the end of my turn 4. No points are scored. A lot of models on the board, so it's getting a bit tight. With 13 minutes left on his clock, Steve starts his fourth turn. Um, On the left side, again, everything is just fighting each other. The only meaningful thing that happens here is that he takes down the Kodiak, that's represented by an empty base here. So he's gone. Everything else is, just chipping away, trying to do some damage, but nothing meaningful at this point in the game. Over on the right side, like expected, Old Rowdy does manage to take down the Kodiak, and the Stryker moves up pretty close to the house, um, trying to take a more aggressive position here. He can still go into the zones, and of course he's closer to Harkevich at this point. And on the right side, the Stormlands charges my Eliminator, um, trying to get her away from the zone. He moved Old Rowdy into that particular zone, actually towing both. So this model is currently in the way and preventing him from scoring the first point of the game. Um, but considering she has such a high defense 17, he actually doesn't manage to take her out. So that's very very nice for me. That saves me having to score a point just to stay on par at this point. In my fifth turn, I really have to be quick about things because I only have 2 minutes on my clock. So I only start doing things that really matter for the eventual outcome of the game, which is points. We both have 0 points right now, so if I manage to just score 1 point and he would clock out, I would win the game. So that's what I try to do. My The Marauder gets a bunch of focus, and he easily takes out that objective, which puts me 1 point ahead. And I believe that's everything that I do. I just end my turn right there. The game right now is becoming really really tense. We really have a number of minutes or even seconds left on the clock. Um, Steve has about 1 minute 45 seconds on his clock right now, and all he needs to achieve, especially after I scored my 1 point, is take out the Eliminator so he can score an easy point by killing the objective, and then nothing really prevents him, at least for now, to start scoring on that zone. Of course, I do have a destroyer close by, as well as a forge here, so I still have models to feed into that zone. But the one thing really cramping his style right now is that Eliminator, which the Stormlands just cannot reliably kill, especially not after him just being engaged and not getting boosted charge attacks from that charge. So what he decides to do is actually charge in Stryker, which was after he again failed to kill her with just the Stormlands. So he charges in Stryker and boosts the hit. I believe he has Met 7, so on average it's actually about average for him to hit her, but he doesn't actually manage. I believe he used 2 attacks, so I think on average, she probably should have been hit. I'm not sure on the statistics, but as it stands, she's still contesting that zone, which is awesome because Old Rowdy took out the objective, obviously. and I'm preventing him from actually going to 2 points versus my 1 point, while I only have really a couple of seconds left on my clock. So that's great. Then on my next turn, I really don't focus at all anymore on what happens on the left. I don't care about killing those models. I cannot clear the zone anymore, so that's kind of done. I think I have 45 seconds still. So I have to prevent him from really scoring points and overtaking me. So my Marauder runs up and is standing in the zone. So with very little time left on his clock, he has to manage taking down a fully operational destroyer in those few seconds. And then again, I end my clock with maybe 12 seconds remaining. Then on his turn, he's of course hard pressed to somehow find a way to come ahead, to score that second point. So he charges my destroyer with Old Rowdy, trying to take him out, which was actually after he did manage to kill the Eliminator with Stryker this time, which was fair enough. I think she definitely has played a very important role this game, and I completely understand why people take Eliminators now. So Rowdy charges the destroyer, but I believe before he rolls all the attacks, the time runs out on Steve's clock. So in the end, a win on Death Clock. It's his 0 seconds versus my 12 seconds. And in this case, it doesn't matter, but we're both on one victory point. I believe this was turn 6 or turn 7. So it was actually a very close call between winning on Death Clock or end of turn 7 and determining on points and other factors who won. In this case, again, I won on Death Clock. The objective points, scenario points were 1-1. And then I scored more victory points, quote unquote. I destroyed more models from his army. And that was the game. After the game ended, Steve and I took some time to discuss the game and how we both felt about what happened. I think Steve's dominant emotion was frustration because he had a plan going in. We even discussed parts of those plans before we started, and he even said that if you skew to one side to prevent me from flanking, I'll probably just deploy everything on the other side, giving me a very easy time to score that right zone. And because he's so much faster, he can then harass me in my zone and prevent me from scoring points. All the while he is a very strong position in that right zone. But then as soon as I deployed and it was his turn to set up his army, he didn't follow through with that idea. So in hindsight, he was like, what the hell? Why didn't I do what I actually even told you? Also, he forgot the feat on turn 2, so that was, of course, a mistake. A mistake that I'm very familiar with because there's been numerous games where I actually forgot to feat with Harkevich, despite having committed my army hardcore. So that's something I'm familiar with. And also it's also something he mentioned even beforehand, and he gave this, he thought about this beforehand, to not commit his army on my feat turn, because he knows he cannot really do enough damage, especially if he doesn't have the charge. And he went in anyway, despite knowing that walking to engage with the majority of his models just doesn't really have the same impact. So I think he would have preferred to just stay back, let me do my thing, and then really go for that alpha anyway. So yeah, kind of a negative experience from that point of view, where he really had all these plans and he didn't really follow up, and that really put him on the back foot the whole time. On my part, I'm happy with how it went. It's my first win in a very long time. I won one game at the tournament. That's also on the channel. But in this setting against Steve, I haven't won in a very long time. So I'm happy that finally I managed to squeeze something out, even though it was quite sketchy with death clock and no points being scored until the very end. But at least it does good things for my morale. The plan that I had going in of focusing on the left zone and harassing the right zone with a warjack or two and the eliminators worked out. The cloud tactics worked out to prevent him from getting the alpha on me, especially with the feet. I didn't forget to feed this time myself, which is very positive. That's really a great help in the Harkevich list. Um, so I'm overall quite happy with how it went. I'm especially impressed with the fort chairs. Again, normally I have Behemoth with two fort chairs, and this time the two destroyers. And I became a lot more familiar during this game with the Jack Marshall abilities, and I think there's actually quite a few good ones. And I didn't really feel like I had resources lacking in making the destroyers do what I wanted to do. Of course, extra focus is always nice, but I think it's really quite an efficient package, and it really gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to have them do something on the battlefield. And yeah, all in all, really like that combination, especially because it gives me two jacks instead of just the one big one. So they can be at different places at different times, and there's just more armor and more overall threat for the opponent to deal with. So definitely a very positive experience or first experience there. Eliminators, awesome. Of course, she basically won the match for me. I think the first eliminator I really threw away was dumb, not to realize that he could arc off of the objective with melee attacks. But definitely very, very good. So I'm gonna see if I can incorporate them in future lists a little bit more. Maybe even go for a second unit depending on how future games go. Until then, happy gaming.